Thanks, Caroline. Hello, fellow Rotarians and environmental trailblazers. It's a true privilege to introduce someone I deeply admire, not only for unparalleled expertise, but for the heart, humility, and humanity she brings along with it. Brenda Davis, registered dietitian, is recognized globally as one of the most influential leaders in plant-based nutrition. Known by many as the godmother of vegan dietitians, Brenda has shaped this movement from the ground up, not through trends or fads, but through rigorous science, deep compassion, and decades of real-world impact. She has spoken at conferences in 28 countries across 6 continents, earning top accolades for her ability to translate complex nutritional science into practical, empowering guidance. Her 13 best-selling books, including Nourish, Plant-Powered Protein, and Becoming Vegan series, have sold over 1 million copies and are considered gold standards by health professionals around the world. And her work isn't just theoretical, it's transformational. She served as the lead dietitian in the landmark Diabetes Reversal Project in the Marshall Islands and again in Lithuania, with results published in leading medical journals. These are projects that heal lives, restore dignity, and offer real hope for communities facing health and food system challenges. But what makes Brenda especially powerful in a Rotary context is how closely her work aligns with our values. She's all about service, serving people, public health, and the planet. Her family has deep connections to Rotary, and she embodies the 4-way test in action. And how do I know this for sure? Because when I contacted her months before RICON, she was so gracious to donate her time and expertise for SRAG's inaugural full-day workshop, Building a Better World, as lead presenter and breakout expert, and also took the time to come to our environmental hub, even with a packed work schedule. Every moment with her was such a joy. She really does live out the motto, service above self. So please join me in welcoming a true change maker, an educator, advocate, and one of the kindest Canadians you'll meet, Brenda Davis.
Thank you so much. Your introduction is probably the most beautiful introduction I've ever had. It was really touching. So thank you so much for that. It is such an honor and a privilege to be with so many distinguished guests today. I am really happy to be a part of this session. May I begin sharing my slides? I'm guessing so. Okay, just a second. Okay, I think I'm good to go. I was asked today to speak about plant-based nutrition essentials. And so I'll begin with a very brief overview. I'm going to just quickly mention what we know about the nutritional adequacy of plant-based diets, and then we'll hone in on specific nutrients of interest. And we don't have time to cover them all, but we'll talk about protein, omega-3 fatty acids, calcium, vitamin B12, iron, and iodine. And then we will conclude with a practical piece called Making It Work. So let's begin with the nutritional adequacy of plant-based diets. I think that the weight of the evidence was most powerfully summarized in this Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics position statement from 2016. And I quote, "Appropriately planned vegetarian diets, including total vegetarian or vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. Well-planned vegetarian diets are appropriate for individuals during all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, and for athletes." And the Academy has become a little more granular with position statements. and they will be doing specific statements for different stages of the life cycle. In 2025, they released their first of these position statements on adults. And as you can see, the position is pretty much identical to what it was in 2016. There was also a systematic review of 41 studies in 2021 that looked at various dietary patterns, including vegan, vegetarian, and omnivorous patterns, and identified the nutrients that were at risk of inadequacy in each pattern and the nutrients with favorably high intakes with each dietary pattern. And as you can see, the nutrients are similar for vegetarian and vegan diets, but surprisingly, for vegetarian diets, there were 2 more nutrients than there were for vegan diets, fiber and vitamin E. Fiber surprised me for vegetarians, but some vegetarians actually aren't getting enough fiber. And you can see that the nutrients with favorably high intake, the dietary pattern with the most nutrients with favorably high intake is a vegan diet with having the highest fiber, PUFA, alpha-linolenic acid, vitamins B1, B6, C, E, folate, and magnesium. And the authors of this paper concluded that there are nutrient inadequacies across all dietary patterns, including vegan, vegetarian, and meat-based diets. But as plant-based diets are generally better for health and for the environment, public health strategies should facilitate the transition to a balanced diet with a more diverse nutrient dense, diverse nutrient dense plant foods through consumer education, food fortification, and possibly supplementation. So let's look specifically at the nutrients of concern. We will focus on 2 macronutrients, protein and omega-3 fatty acids, and 4 micronutrients, calcium, B12, iron, and iodine. So let's begin with protein. I love this cartoon. It's this little rodent asking this very big muscular gorilla, "No meat at all. Are you sure you're getting enough protein?" And the point being that even the largest mammals on the planet manage to get enough protein from plants to build big muscles. And people can too. And this is just 2 examples. This is on the left, Neme Delgado. He's been vegetarian since birth, vegan since 2015. He's never eaten meat in his life. And to look at him, you would say he's doing pretty well. And then to the right, we have Jahina Malik. She's been vegan since birth. She's never eaten meat, dairy, or eggs in her life. And it looks like she's doing pretty well with muscle building as well. So how much protein do people actually need? Well, in terms of grams per kilogram per day, infants need about 1.2 to 1.5, children around 1 gram per kilogram, teens around 0.85, and adults around 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. It's a little higher during pregnancy at 1.1 and during lactation at 1.3 grams per kilogram per day. So what is this in terms of the number of grams of protein we would need per day? Well, the numbers that I will share are only specific to the reference body weights you see in red. They would have to be adjusted for each individual, but it's very important to note that body weight is based on healthy body weight, not actually current body weight, because for a person who's very overweight, for example, their needs would be based on what a healthy body weight for them would be. So for infants, it would be around 10 grams per day. For toddlers, 1 to 3 years of age, it's about 13. For older children, around 19 to 34. For adults and teens, it would be between 46 and 56. And for pregnant and lactating women, 63 to 75. So how much are we actually eating? Well, based on 7 studies that compared intakes in meat eaters, vegetarians, and vegans, meat eaters averaged about 92 grams a day, vegetarians about 76, and vegans about 72. So you can see that they're all well above the RDAs. So are there groups that may actually need intakes that are above the RDA? And there possibly are. Whole food plant-based eaters in some cases may need a little bit more. Athletes need more, and older adults may also need more. So let's take a look at each of these. So for whole food plant-based eaters, there's no separate RDA, but some experts suggest adding 10% to the RDA for adults, a little more for children, to compensate for the lower digestibility of protein in whole plant foods. This is not thought to be necessary if low fiber plant foods such as tofu, soy milk, plant-based meat alternatives, seitan, and possibly nut and seed butters are consumed on a daily basis, because these foods have digestibility similar to animal products. So if we look at protein digestibility from plants, it's reduced by fiber, by trypsin inhibitors, tannins, phytates, lectins, and products of the Maillard reaction. And compared to animal products, protein digestibility is about 10 to 15% lower from whole plant foods, but it's about the same in lower fiber and many processed plant foods. So plant foods that have had the foods broken down so that the particle size is very small, digestibility is improved. And so if we look at digestibility from things like seitan, soy protein isolate, peanut butter, tofu, even whole wheat flour or white flour for that matter, it will range from about 92 to 98% digestibility. And that compares very favorably to animal products such as beef, milk, and eggs, which range from about 94 to 97% digestible. But if you look at whole grains and legumes, the digestibility averages around 85%, which is about 10% lower than it is for lower fiber plant foods and animal products. So what about for athletes? Well, there's no separate RDA for athletes, but health and sports authorities typically recommend 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram per day. But the higher caloric intakes in athletes makes meeting their needs relatively easy. And I think it's important to note that we don't need meat to grow big muscles. This was Mr. Universe in 2014, Barney Duplessis, and he's 100% plant-based. Plant-based athletes can meet protein needs by ensuring a variety of protein-rich choices and sufficient calories. But studies, and we have many studies that have shown that plant and animal protein sources are equally effective in promoting muscle hypertrophy or muscle growth when plant protein ingestion is sufficient, and that's generally at about 1.5 grams per kilogram per day. So what about for older adults? We don't have a separate RDA in North America for older adults, but there are separate recommendations in many countries, including Australia and many European nations, including all of the Nordic countries. But consensus is building that at least 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram per day is needed. And this is because older adults digest and absorb protein less efficiently, and they have a lower capacity to build and retain muscle. And so these higher recommended intakes may actually help to protect against age-related conditions such as sarcopenia, frailty, and even osteoporosis. So achieving this level of intake can be quite challenging for older adults because caloric intakes are typically reduced in this population. And many doctors will say, well, I've never seen a case of protein deficiency in vegetarians or vegans. But actually I have, and we see this particularly in older women. And we see it as skin fragility, hair loss, brittle nails, muscle weakness, fatigue, inability to fight infection, poor wound healing, long recovery times, and mood changes. And I want to share a testimony from a client who had low protein intakes. She said, I was frustrated by many symptoms after following a whole food plant-based diet for some time. I emailed Brenda Davis and she assessed my diet. She suggested increasing my protein intake from about 35 to 40 grams a day to about 60 to 70 grams a day. I feel better and look better. My skin is vastly improved with increased protein. No band-aids, no bleeding, more opaque, and much less bruising. My abdomen is receding. These are issues I've dealt with since my mid-70s, and now at 83 years of age, they're clearing up. I think it's really important that older adults know that even on healthy, whole food, plant-based diets, protein can fall short and increasing intake can be very helpful. And I want to just give you an idea of what we did to increase her protein intake. It was really quite simple. So for breakfast, a lot of my senior women are having, oatmeal with almond milk, a banana or blueberries or something like that, some flax seeds, salad for lunch with whole grain bread, hummus, tomato slices, and an orange. And for dinner, a stuffed sweet potato, some avocado, broccoli, and chia pudding. And the stuffing in the sweet potato was a black bean and corn filling. And even with that really healthy diet, she's only getting 41 grams of protein a day. So what I did was, and you can see the foods that are highlighted in red are foods that I swapped, and those in purple are foods that I added in. So all I did was I swapped her almond milk at breakfast and dinner for soy milk. And I swapped her no-fat dressing for a more nutritious tahini hemp seed dressing. And then I added just 1 tablespoon of hemp seeds at lunch and a third of a cup of tofu cubes, at breakfast, and a third of a cup of tofu cubes at lunch. And doing that, I added 31 grams of protein to bring her up to 72 grams a day. So getting enough protein is really just about including at least one protein-rich choice at each meal, preferably beans, lentils, split peas, or some sort of soy food like tofu or tempeh or edamame. Seitan and veggie meats are options. Of course, adding nuts and seeds are also good options. We want to include some lower fiber choices in the mix like tofu and soy milk to increase digestibility of plant protein, and select non-dairy milks or plant milks that have more protein like soy or pea milks. Moving on to omega-3 fatty acids, the big question that arises is fish necessary for omega-3s? And the answer is actually no. There are plant-based omega-3 sources. There are sources of alpha-linolenic acid like chia flax and hemp seeds, walnuts, and then some novel sources like ahi flour, perilla, and akim seed oils. And then there are also sources of EPA and DHA. Now, in most cultures, EPA and DHA are coming from fish, but for people that aren't eating fish, it's really wonderful to know that fish get their EPA and DHA from microalgae in our oceans and in our waters. And microalgae is actually the original source of EPA and DHA. We're now culturing EPA and DHA by culturing microalgae, and it is widely available in supplement form for plant-based eaters who wish to consume direct sources of EPA and DHA. EPA is also available in macroalgae or seaweed, and DHA is available in eggs for people that are lacto-ovo vegetarian or who are predominantly plant-based and continue to eat eggs. If we look at the omega-3 intakes and status of plant-based eaters, ALA intakes are similar to or higher than that of omnivores, but for EPA and DHA in vegans, they have minimal intake unless they're taking supplements, And their status, it's about 40 to 70% lower than in omnivores. And for lacto-ovo vegetarians, the intake depends on egg intake because eggs are a good source of DHA. The status is about 30% lower than in omnivores. So how do we optimize omega-3 fatty acid status for plant-based eaters? Number one, we need to ensure sufficient alpha-linolenic acid. How much do we need? Well, the acceptable intake in the US and Canada is 1.1 grams a day for women, 1.6 for men. If you're not taking direct sources of EPA and DHA, I would suggest doubling that to 2.2 grams for women and 3.2 for men. So where do we get this stuff? Well, walnuts and flaxseed, an ounce of walnuts or a teaspoon of flaxseed oil provide over 2 grams of ALA. A tablespoon of flax or chia seeds provide between 1.5 and 2 grams. And we get smaller amounts from hemp seeds, canola oil, and green leafy vegetables. I would recommend, if possible, taking a direct source of long-chain omega-3s to boost your omega-3 fatty acid index to closer to 6 to 8%. Average in vegans is closer to 3 or 4%, and recommended range is at least 8%, but even 6% is pretty good. So how do we accomplish that? Well, for children, it ranges, the suggested supplement would range from 1 to 500 milligrams per day, depending on the age of the child. And for individuals 14 plus, it would be 250 to 1500. During pregnancy, I would suggest 500 to 1500. Moving on to calcium. So how much calcium do we need? During childhood, it ranges from 7 to 1300 milligrams, 700 for preschoolers or toddlers, and 1300 for anyone 9 years of age and for any child 9 years of age and older. For adults, it's 1,000 milligrams for females up to 50 and males up to 70. For females over 50 and males over 70, it increases to 1,200 milligrams a day. So how much are we actually consuming? Well, in these 6 studies, mainly from North America and Europe, vegans are averaging just under 900 milligrams, vegetarians and omnivores just over 1,000 milligrams. So how can we get enough calcium without dairy? Well, number one is we need to learn what the plant's sources of calcium are, and we need to eat sufficient amounts of those foods. The main foods are low oxalate greens, nuts and seeds such as almonds, chia seeds, and unhulled sesame seeds or tahini. Beans and tofu, especially tofu that's precipitated with calcium, are also excellent sources, as is blackstrap molasses and figs. Now, the other thing we can do is to select calcium fortified non-dairy milks and other calcium fortified foods. Calcium fortified milks tend to provide about 300 milligrams of calcium per cup, which is very similar to cow's milk. And tofu made with calcium provides about 100 to 300 milligrams per half cup. 1 to 2 servings of non-dairy milk, of fortified non-dairy milk, along with other calcium-rich foods, tends to get us pretty close to the RDA. So one of the questions people often ask is the calcium in plant foods actually bioavailable? And the answer is yes, absolutely it is. We absorb about 32 to 34% of the calcium from dairy products. It's very similar from tofu made with calcium and soy milk. It's actually higher from greens that are low in oxalates, around 40 to 70%. It's a little lower than that from legumes and sweet potatoes at about 20% plus, and it's much lower from high oxalate foods. So foods like spinach, beet greens, and Swiss chard have a lot of calcium in them, but that calcium is not very bioavailable, and the same is true for rhubarb. So we also want to be aware of factors that impact calcium absorption. So things like oxalates, phytates, excessive sodium, high acid load, alcohol, and caffeine can all reduce the absorption of calcium, whereas vitamin D has a positive impact on improving calcium absorption. as does distributing the amount of calcium we eat throughout the day. So we're going to absorb more calcium if we eat, 300 milligrams at each meal than if we ate 900 milligrams at one meal. And the other thing is younger individuals and people who are pregnant tend to also absorb more calcium. Vitamin B12 is certainly a nutrient of the interest for plant-based eaters. And we need about 2.5 micrograms a day during adulthood, a little more during pregnancy and lactation, and a little less during childhood. But still, somewhere between 1 and 2 micrograms a day. It's important to note that plant foods do come up short on B12. They're not reliable sources unless they're fortified with vitamin B12. Even foods that are commonly thought to be reliable sources, like organic vegetables, seaweed, fermented foods, and mushrooms, should not be relied on as sole sources of vitamin B12 because the amounts they contain are variable. Some contain none, and fermented foods vary depending on the cleanliness of the vats they're fermented in. So there are a lot of variables. So they really should not be relied on as sole sources. Vitamin B12 stores can last for 2 to 3 years or even more in adults. But breastfed babies born to B12 deficient mothers can develop symptoms of B12 deficiency within weeks of birth and experience irreversible brain damage within months of birth. And seniors are also at higher risk because 10 to 30% of people over the age of 50 years have a diminished ability to cleave the B12 off of the protein it's bound to in animal products. So the Institute of Medicine recommends supplements or fortified foods for everyone in this age group. B12 deficiency actually can increase risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So this is important to note. We really don't want to mess with vitamin B12. Plant-based eaters and everyone over 50 needs to ensure a reliable daily source of B12 and monitor B12 status. So what are reliable sources? Well, supplements, and we need at least 1,000 micrograms 2 to 3 times per week for adults, a little less for children, or 500 to 1,000 micrograms a day for seniors. Vitamin B12 fortified foods are reliable sources, as are animal products for those under the age of 50 years. They should not be relied on as sources for those over 50. Moving on to iron, how much do we need? Well, women need 18 milligrams per day. It increases to 27 milligrams during pregnancy, but drops to 9 during lactation. Men and women over or who are postmenopausal need about 8 milligrams per day. And it is shocking that infants 7 to 12 months need 11 milligrams. That's more than what a grown man would need. And that is an amount that is hard to achieve without some iron fortified foods like iron fortified infant cereal. And then the amounts that are recommended for children range from about 7 to 15 milligrams. So how much are we actually consuming? Well, omnivores in 3 large studies averaged around 20 milligrams or less. It was 17 milligrams in 2 studies. Lacto-ovo-vegetarians averaged around 20 milligrams, and vegans averaged around 20 to 23 milligrams. So what you notice is vegans consume as much or more iron as omnivores, but the absorption is lower, and the risk for iron deficiency is not typically higher, except perhaps in menstruating women. But we do have lower ferritin stores. Lower iron stores that are within the normal range don't affect how a person feels, don't appear to be a disadvantage when the diet replenishes iron losses. And in fact, it may turn out to be a bit of an advantage, as higher serum ferritin is associated with an increased risk of some chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease. So how can we ensure sufficient iron in a plant-based diet? Well, number one, we want to select iron-rich foods from each food group. Within the legume group, lentils are at the top of the pile, and then other beans, chickpeas, and tofu. Nuts and seeds. Seeds are especially concentrated sources, but almonds, Brazil nuts, cashews, and pine nuts are also good sources. In the grain group, the pseudo grains like amaranth and quinoa tend to be quite high, as do teff, wheat, and fortified grains. And fruits and vegetables tend to be a little on the lower side, but peas, string beans, leafy greens, dried fruit, and prune juice are all reasonable sources. Number two, we want to moderate our intake of the things that inhibit iron absorption. So phytates in whole grains and legumes, but especially it's concentrated in wheat bran. Polyphenolic compounds like tannins in teas, zinc supplements, especially when they're single nutrient supplements, and calcium and dairy products all can reduce iron absorption. Number three is to boost intake of iron absorption enhancers like foods rich in vitamin C and organic acids. If we're eating lentils, it's a great idea to have some peppers with them, like red peppers or something like that, or to have lemon or lime squeezed on top to enhance iron absorption. Spices such as pepper, turmeric, and ginger enhance iron absorption, as do allium vegetables and foods that are rich in beta carotene. And now iodine. Iodine is the number one. Iodine deficiency is the number one cause of preventable brain damage in the world. And mild deficiency in pregnant women can lower IQ by 10 to 15 points in their offspring, adversely affecting learning ability. So iodine is a nutrient we really do need to be conscious of. So how much do we need? About 150 micrograms a day for everyone 14 years of age and over. It's a little higher during pregnancy and lactation and a little lower for children, but you can see it's still pretty high, between 90 and 130 milligrams or micrograms per day. And the other thing I want you to note is the upper limit is only 1,100 micrograms for adults, and it's only 200 to 600 for children. So it's a fairly small range between the recommended intake and the upper limit that could cause harm. And people who eat plant exclusive diets are at increased risk unless they're regular seaweed consumers. Why? Because we have fewer plant iodine sources. Many health conscious individuals avoid iodized salt, and many people are unaware of potential iodine shortfalls. So how do we make sure we get enough? Well, we can use a supplement like iodine drops or a multivitamin with iodine. We can include appropriate amounts of safe types of seaweeds. And if we're using salt, we can select iodized salt or iodized sea salt. So how much are we getting from these things? Well, a half a teaspoon of iodized salt contains close to that 150 micrograms a day. And then we can see we're not getting a lot from whole plant foods. You can see a little bit from things like prunes, lima beans, and green peas. We get a fair bit from things like eggs, cow's milk, and fish. So these are important sources for people who are omnivorous, pesco-vegetarian or pescatarian, or lacto-ovo vegetarian. Now you can see the amounts for sea vegetables can be enormous, between 9 and 4,300 micrograms per gram of food. And so this, and so I just want to mention about a 12th to a 16th of a teaspoon of kelp powder. It provides 150 micrograms. So if you consumed a whole teaspoon of kelp powder, you would be above the upper limit. So we really do need to know the amounts in various sea vegetables. Now, nori is very safe. From a big sheet of nori, you're getting less than the RDA. So that's a very safe source. So, summing up, making it work, it's a really good idea to use a plant-based food guide. And I've been a part of creating food guides in a variety of the books I've written, such as Nourish. You see this guide, and basically half your plate is fruits and vegetables. About a quarter of the plate is legumes, nuts, and seeds, and about a quarter of the plate grains and starches. But you don't want to forget about the add-ons, EPA, DHA, B12, iodine, and vitamin D. The vegan plate is very similar with a highlighting of the calcium-rich foods in each of those food groups. So you want to make whole or minimally processed plant foods dietary staples. You want to strive for about 9 or more servings of colorful fruits and vegetables every day, and you want the whole rainbow of fruits and vegetables, and certainly a variety. Legumes, I would recommend 3 or more servings a day. And again, it doesn't mean it has to be 3 piles of beans. It can be tofu or tempeh. It can be peanut butter. It can be hummus. It can be, loaves and soups and so on. Whole grains, you want them mostly intact, and your intakes mostly will range from about 3 to 6 servings a day, but can be much higher for people with higher energy needs. Nuts and seeds, at least a serving a day, and you want them to include omega-3 rich choices, and you want to sprinkle it all with generous amounts of herbs and spices, which are especially rich in phytochemicals and antioxidants. And you may want to consider adding in high quality supplements when they're indicated. We need reliable sources of B12, vitamin D, iodine, and omega-3 fatty acids. A multivitamin mineral supplement may be well advised for those at risk for shortfalls. Our take-home message is that high-quality plant-based diets are nutritionally adequate at every stage of life, and they are also more ecologically sustainable, and in my view, also more ethically justifiable, because they mean less pain, suffering, and death for our fellow beings. And I just want to end with a quick note on ecologically sustainable choices, because this is what SRAG is all about. If we compare popular diets, the carbon footprint of popular diets, we can see vegan diets or completely plant-based diets at the very bottom end of the kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents per 1,000 calories. And what we see is, compared to vegan diets, the carbon footprint of keto diets is over 4 times higher. It's close to 4 times higher for paleo diets, and it's over 3 times higher for omnivorous diets. And the reason is really simple. Animal-based foods tend to have a very large carbon footprint, especially meat like beef and lamb, compared to plant-based foods, which generally have a low or very low carbon footprint. So with that, these are some of my books. I would like to say thank you very much for your attention. And I will stop my share and take any questions you might have.
Hi.